Hello and welcome to Self Talk. My name is Danko Sidorovsky, your host. To my right, I have Herb Martin, life coach and psychotherapist. And our special guest today, thank you for coming, Anthony Ballios, actor, amongst many other things. Welcome to our show.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
I want to just get into right away your latest film that you were in. Tell us a little bit about it. It was called Gangster Report?
Yes.
Okay. And tell me about the movie a little bit, and then talk a little bit about your role.
Well, it's based on the biblical story of David versus Goliath, and my role is Toothpick Paulie in the film. I'm one of the bad guys. So I guess you could compare me in some ways to the Joker in Batman. When I show up, something not so good probably is going to happen. Mm-hmm. So it takes place in 1930s Detroit, so it's a period piece. And it was amazing, the people that I worked with.
Who was the
great
director?
Experience.
Who was the director?
Dean Olivas. He was a first-time director, and he was very enjoyable to work with. We became friends over the course of the film. So,
was it part of the film incentive that was the Michigan Film Incentive?
No, it was not. It was done through Madonna University.
Okay.
So the film incentives were not a part of the process of making this film.
So a lot of the script, is it mostly fictional, or is it based off of some true people that lived in Detroit, that were gangsters in Detroit?
It's mostly fictional. The Purple Gang is mentioned at times in the film. Outside of this, there are no characters that are historical figures in any way in the film.
What's kind of interesting is if you go back to that time frame, and through the 70s, Detroit obviously had gang activity and other type of mafia-related situations happening, but Detroit didn't really see a lot of what New York saw or Chicago saw with Al Capone and different things. So it's kind of interesting. It seemed like maybe the whole element around that time was a lot different around here. Maybe there wasn't as much, maybe there was, and it was...
Well, the Purple Gang was notorious, and there's on Oakland Avenue, it's a place they used to go. It's like a bathhouse. My dad, that's in his era.
I see.
And he delivered ice to him.
Oh.
Yeah, and
He survived through all that. Huh?
yeah, and
I brought a lot of ice.
All the major guys in that thing. He talked about it, and people were afraid of him.
What were some of the things that they did as far as to keep in existence? Did they run nightclubs? Did they?
Well, they had their own way of getting money. You know,
extortion.
It was a lot of. There you go, and it's a lot of murders, and they come to this place, and
there's a hustling, bustling city.
There's a bustling city. The numbers, and that kind of thing. If you guys know what the numbers were, the numbers were like poor families, rich families, not rich families basically, but you play the numbers. Even I played the numbers, but that was in a later generation.
So that was an element of gambling, technically.
Yeah, you would, if you have a dream, they have dream books and whatnot, especially black people. if you dream about
Something.
something that happened, and that's a number for it.
I see.
And then,
So,
So on,
but
so on.
basically, it's like the 4-digit lottery that we have today.
well, it's a lot different because you go from house to house, and you play a number, and you get paid for that number as it comes.
Who pays you? Who paid you in the old days?
In the old days, the gangsters.
Oh,
They run the show. It's like guys had their little books. They're about this big,
uh-huh.
and they write the number. Then the bets go in. Then some of them will pay you, you know.
Right.
And until later on, they begin to do some strong arm stuff. It went on and on like. And that was,
What in this film are some of the gangster things that people are doing in the film?
Well, tying into the Purple Gang, leading into that, there's a story that it seems like you guys may be interested in, and also the audience that is watching. I use a Tommy gun in the film. That's my main weapon of choice, I guess I could say. And the story behind it is the Detroit police have archives, and Christopher Nicken, who was involved in the film, he was an executive producer. He was able to obtain the Tommy gun from them. And the story behind the Tommy gun is that during World War I, more or less, Spain produced a lot of guns, Tommy guns, thinking that the war would continue on for a long period of time. War ended more quickly, and in turn, they had all these extra Tommy guns, which the mafia in the U.S. started to buy. They started buying up all these Tommy guns and shipping them to the U.S. illegally. In this instance, the Purple Gang ended up buying a shipment of Tommy guns, and they had them shipped to Windsor. 2 people from the Purple Gang, I'm not sure of their names, I think it is on record somewhere, they went to get the shipment on a boat. And they got the shipment, they started bringing it back. They went from Detroit to Windsor, and on the way from Windsor back to Detroit, the Detroit police more or less caught them and confiscated all the guns.
Ah,
On the shipment is the one gun, or the shipment included the gun that I ended up using in the film that was confiscated in that instance, so it's kind of a
so you had a
cool
period piece.
Yeah, it's an actual
Sure.
real Tommy gun from, I think it's from 1920, well, it's in the 20s somewhere in that area.
Did you shoot blanks in the film, or how did you
Well, it
guys
was,
actually, or graphic?
There was some movie magic incorporated with that.
I see.
So, yeah.
Right. So, how did the role get cast, and how did you go ahead and think that you wanted to be part of this film? What kind of brought you to want to be a part of that film?
My love for film, I'm passionate about it. There was a open casting call. I went to it. They had a cold read, which more or less means I had no idea exactly what the script would be. I had an idea of what the character was, but outside of that, I knew nothing else per se. So when I went there, they gave me the script. I prepared for a few minutes, and went in, did a cold read, and then I'm not sure if it was a month or 2 after that. Then they more or less called me and said, would you like to play the role of Toothpick Paulie? And by all means, I said yes. Yeah,
Excellent. So I'm picturing him driving there and thinking what's going through his mind as he's getting there to audition, because you want the role, but how are you preparing yourself mentally on the drive and before that so that you can get that role? Because I think a lot of our audience would like to know some of that.
As we were actually discussing before the show, Herb, I've read a number of self-talk books, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself by Dr. Shad Helmstetter, and a book by the name of Psycho-Cybernetics. And I incorporate a lot of what is mentioned in these books prior to doing an audition, preparing myself mentally, physically. In this instance, leading up to going to the audition, I did do a number of positive affirmations.
Give me an example.
auditions go smoothly and easily for me, and I'm supremely confident, something along those lines. Yeah. And very often what I do as well is visualize the night before for approximately 15 minutes. Upon relaxing, I do some relaxation breathing. And so leading up to that, even before, the night before, or even more so than that, I do the visualization of not only seeing things how I'd want them to play out in my audition, but other aspects of my life. So I guess that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, it does, because to a certain point, and maybe Herb can amplify this a little bit, but it's interesting that I think most actors don't go in like that. I think that a lot of actors might come in and go, well, I just want that role, and kind of think radically and don't give those things, and they may not end up with the results they want. Herb, what do you think about?
I really think that there are couple things that I thought about while you were speaking. Is that, like I said, you have a lot of energy, and it's there. That's the natural part.
Well, thank you.
And then you've read the stuff. You're even using the self-talk to yourself, which is partially the writers, when they talk about that, I'm going to do something, the self-talk. You see it and you begin to feel it. You begin to feel it, and that energy goes into it. But your energy, I can imagine, is very powerful, because you speak with conviction. You got the gun, I'm on you. It's like it happened already in that time. It's like being there in the moment.
You bring up something nice there, Herb, and you brought it up too, is I think obviously our show is self-talk, and our goal is to make people aware of their self-talk and how it can benefit them in their lives. So one of the first steps is self-awareness of what you're saying to yourself currently, and then how can I reposition that self-talk to help me be who I want to be and be true to myself. So what he mentioned, which I thought was really, self-talk can help to a certain point, but we've talked about, and you've mentioned, that visualization.
Very important.
How do you, so let's say someone is sitting there talking positively to themselves, but they don't believe it. How do you get them from talking to themselves to believing it?
It's a question of who you are and how much faith you have, and also the imagination, the most powerful thing in the world. I once knew a person that said to me, Herb, you just talk, and you're not going to be, you can't do this or that, And I said, I know the difference between you and I. If I couldn't imagine things, I'd want to die.
How did she put it exactly, though? That you have too much of an imagination?
Yes. And because I was in my youth and doing 2 or 3 things, but just think of the
and sharing that imagination with her, obviously.
Yeah, but to her, everything's hard and clear.
Black or white.
Black or white. And my imagination, look, I work extemporaneously, and I can name the amount of money I'm going to make within $500. I see it.
You see it.
So
that, I like what Herb contributed there, was that what I got out of that is that he got rid of that person that didn't let him use his imagination.
That's right.
So tell me, Anthony, about how you've positioned yourself to go after these roles, because Detroit obviously is not the film mecca of the world. There's so many roles that are here. not a lot. And I'm sure that there's quite a few people that are going after them. It's quite competitive. So, and a lot of people would be like, well, why are you even trying to be an actor in Detroit? So how have you figured out what support mechanisms around you and people? And give me an example of somebody that maybe has been a big supporting factor in your life and somebody that wasn't.
Well, my mom has been a huge supporting factor in my life in regards to acting ever since the beginning when I first became interested in doing it. Maybe my dad, not so much, which it is what it is,
Well,
I guess.
Well, maybe he's more of a realist, maybe not realist, but more of hey, you got to do this to do this, and maybe your mother's got more of an imagination.
That could be it. Yeah, my dad is a little more, I guess,
Concrete.
being a realist. He's a bit older and he's set in his ways.
And
I guess
results oriented quickly, possibly.
Not so much. I mean, he worked at GM for right around 43 years. So he had his routine, he does his own things, and then he has his own perception, I guess, of a path to success, I guess, in the corporate world, more or less. And which obviously acting is nothing, can't even compare to being in corporate America.
How do you block that out? How do you block those
Well,
negative?
through the items that I described earlier in our conversation, through self-talk, visualization, reading books, along those lines, I would say. Getting involved more in my acting, preparing, visualizing.
How do you study your acting and keep it honed up?
I read a lot. There's a source online called Backstage, which has a lot of articles related to actors, not only acting though, all aspects of film, whether you're doing voiceover work or behind the scenes work. It's a very good resource from people that are in the industry that have had success.
How is your mother, give us a couple examples of some things maybe your mother said to help you with your acting career.
Well, I'd like to also say before I answer that, I love my mom and dad equally, and it is what it is. I mean, they both mean the best for me, obviously, with how much support they give me.
Absolutely.
And that's okay. My mom, what was it again, please?
What are the words that came out of her mouth that helped to support your dreams?
Well, I guess stepping back a little bit, when I first became interested in acting, I first became interested in modeling, and then that led to acting. When I said I was interested in doing modeling, though, I mean, my mom was go for it, do it without hesitation, without any, anything along, any negative feedback in any way. So she's always been, supportive, with the words she said. I guess that's the main thing from the beginning. Yeah.
You can do it. Those are the
go
kinds of
for
words.
it. Yeah,
Go for it. We're here for
enjoy
you.
it. Yeah,
Enjoy
have
it.
fun. Give your best, kind of thing along those lines.
Because that's a big feature in helping to get your self-talk and your imagination working together is to have some. We've talked a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, there's a belief that you can't see things, and that visualization that you can see things, and a lot of people just think it's more like a gimmick. But very early, you begin to visualize, and it comes from only you. What is the most comfortable thing for you? You will remember it, and then you start putting the pieces together, and so and their feelings along with that. So, and also identification in your subconscious. Like, it's not such a magical thing, but here's what it does. You begin to collect in your mind, unconsciously. I might be walking down the street and I see something, oh, there's something familiar. And you begin to notice things which you're not taking in, but you notice them and they add up to some kind of concept about where you want to be. And you're not even, you put it in that bank. Oh, look, every time that I see I want to do something different, I've already seen it, and it multiplies and it multiplies.
What's interesting about what you just said, Herb, is when you're walking down a street or you identify with something. I was listening to a program and they talked about how we humans are very emotionally based.
Yeah.
Right? So if we see a bird on a wire singing, that may give us a good feeling about something.
That's right.
And if we see a red car, that might give us an emotion that makes us feel negative about something. So is that kind of related to how do we then take our self-talk along and help to identify those emotions and kind of manage those emotions into a positive way?
Okay. For me, this is the way it has worked. I worked in a store, and in that store, the boss always had me drive his car because nobody, I was 16, something like that, and I was careful and everything. But he had me drive his Ford, and I didn't like it. I said, whoa, this is a new car and short clutch on it, and I said, this is a piece of junk. I didn't know. So then he's got this big Buick, and he said, Herb, take this to the shop for me. And in those days, no, I got in this big luxury car. I go up, and I stopped, and the guy said to me, sir, I was reminded of the time. First time I was called, I saw all those cars. I said, oh my God. He said, do you want me to drive it up? I said, no, I'll drive it up.
So that brings up, you bring up a great point, right? So you were driving in this beautiful car, and all of a sudden this emotion of being recognized as a sir.
Yes, on top of that.
Right. So my question to Anthony now is, where in your acting career did you find out that this is what you really love to do? Was it similar to that in any respect?
Well, my passion for acting started with actually going to a modeling call in Detroit here at a place called the Rhinoceros Club.
Yeah.
And I do not remember the specifics of the modeling call. I don't think I was not chosen for it, but in the process of going there and the atmosphere, the ambiance, I remember walking in, I felt like I was in a Hollywood film. Just, there's like some smoke.
Absolutely.
It seemed like smoke, fog, whatever it was. People smoking in there, I guess. And then these curtains, red curtains, I remember, in one of the rooms, the couches, the chairs, the way they were, just everything. I felt like I stepped into another time, another world, another era.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I was born in Detroit. This whole experience, though, solidified my love for the city. Thinking back on it, this was actually not too long ago that I started to think why I'm so passionate about the city of Detroit, why I love it so much, why I'm so supportive of it. And I really do firmly believe it's this situation that I experienced by going there to the Rhinoceros Club.
This defining moment.
I think so, yeah.
It was. Yeah. And look at the imagery.
Right. He defines it really well.
Not only as he moves along, he sees a picture. And this is what I'm saying. It is not all at once, maybe, but when I saw those cars, I said, I'm going to have one. first car, about the third car when I got married, I had one, a 1950. It was maybe 12 years old, something like that.
But you got the car that,
Oh, baby.
that made you feel that way.
Yeah. And it's green. I could see it, and it's reality.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do it in so many ways that are really, you've seen things that happen in the movies. Let's say the 30s. Look at the old pictures, the 30s. You know, you can see what happened, and you can put that model, you know. And they modeled movies basically off morals, off love, the Shakespearean idea, you know. All of it follows that, you know. And so, and that those parts help you interpret the world, because you're young. I like shooting then and the war stories, and now I hate them, you know, because I know real people get killed, you know.
Right, right.
It's true.
It's very interesting. So what are some of the locations you guys shot at in Detroit? That's kind of interesting to me,
We
too.
shot at the Detroit Historical Museum, which was awesome, and we actually ended up shooting in the basement area there. I'm not sure if you guys have been there or not.
Yeah, I have.
It is a replica of the early 1900s Detroit.
Right.
It's a bunch of streets,
Right.
and we ended up also shooting at the Redford Theater, which is in Detroit as well. It's a, I think it's considered a Japanese theater, right? I believe it has Japanese history there, and it's the designs and architecture on the interior. One cool thing about that location is they still have, because it was built so long ago, they have horsehair, which is insulation for the whole building. It's still there.
Is that right?
The old horsehair, which is pretty crazy stuff.
Right.
But
Isn't that flammable?
I don't know about all that stuff, but a lot of the original architecture is still there, and it's an amazing building. It's Bruce Campbell. What you can do is you can actually donate money to the location, and then you put your name on a chair. It's like your chair, so to speak. It's like Bruce Campbell, Sam Rami, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. They're local actors
Yeah, I know
or
Sam.
producers that are involved with the area. They've given money to the theater to keep it going.
Yeah.
And their names are right in the front there, I believe, on some of the chairs. So if anybody wants to,
Donate.
first
and
of
help.
all, check out the theater. It's amazing. They have a lot of different events. And secondly, donate. By all means, contact them. And
What
and
kind
give it a shot.
of, one quick question before we wrap up. I wanted to ask you, what kind of charities and things are you related to in the city of Detroit?
The North Woodward Community Foundation is one that I'm very passionate about and involved with. My brother lives in Troy, and that's where it's based out of. Through him, I became involved. He's the president of the North Woodward Community Foundation, and we're involved with Mittens for Detroit. There are a number of different segments of it. Mittens for Detroit was started by Erin Cummings, which is an actress. Her organization is through the North Woodward Community Foundation, and another one is Blessings in a Backpack, which helps. It's surprising how many kids in school districts from Livonia to even Birmingham or West Bloomfield that don't have food on their, enough money in their family to have food. But the Blessings in a Backpack gives them food on the weekends. Children that are in need. In a backpack, it's packaged by individuals and then given to them. So,
Well, any charity work we like to support, and that's really honorable of you, and we appreciate. I think that makes everybody a more rounded individual. So I want to thank you for being on our show. And
before we close, I just want to say one thing too. I expect to hear from you in many ways, because there are not a lot of young people that want to live a life of what they want to do and a life of purpose. And you have the energy for it, and you're going to be very successful. I can feel it.
Herb, thank you.
I agree. Thank you very
appreciate
much
it.
for
My
watching
pleasure.
Self Talk.
Thank you, my friend.
Take care.
Yep.